Alright YouTube, so we're back of course talking about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and with the last couple of videos we looked at a shit ton of translations. I made some pretty long videos compared to what we normally make on this channel, so I thought with today's video we'd do something a little more focus on one translation. Now I wanted to look at this particular translation for one just because it's interesting, but also it kind of furthers the discussion I had like a year ago and answers a question that I had, so let's get right into it. So, apparently within Chapter 17, the reason that the Whisperers leave, like, Aerith's old room when she used to live in the Shinra building is because they sense a disturbance somewhere, potentially Sephiroth in the building, potentially Wedge, because of course Wedge should be dead at this time, based on the original FF7, but he's not. So why this is interesting is because this would seem to imply that they never leave because of our interference, because at the end of the scene you see Tifa jump into the Whisperers to grab Aerith, and they kind of leave right after that. But it wasn't because of Tifa's influence. It wasn't because of what Tifa did. They were going somewhere else. Also, right after they leave is whenever we see Wedge pop up on the TV. So there's a pretty good chance that they left because of him. Also, later on within this chapter, we see them throw Wedge out of the building. So they are specifically going after him. But it could be because of Sephiroth as well. Probably both. So why this is interesting is that it would seem that they cannot be everywhere at once. There's only a small group of them within this room that are messing with Aerith, and then because of something happening somewhere else, they had to leave and go help with whatever that was. So it seemed like there's a finite amount of them, even though we see a shit ton of them at the end of the game. It seems like there's only so many around at one time. Now, something I'm not sure of, and maybe you guys can let me know in the comments, is do we have an answer yet as to what the Whisperers are? What they physically actually are. I know they're created by the planet to keep Destiny and Fate in line or whatever. I don't know, are they souls of people? I know that's a theory out there that some people have talked about, because some people think that, with Zack potentially being dead at the end of the intermission DLC, people in the church are potentially dead. A lot of people think that they're Whisperers, or gonna be Whisperers, or whatever the case. So if the Whisperers are essentially souls of people, there should be such an astronomical amount of them that they should be able to mess with Aerith when they want to, mess with Wedge if they need to, follow Sephiroth around and keep everybody else in line and stuff like that. This should be super easy. There should be so many of them, it's ridiculous. Just looking at us, our planet Earth, which, guys, not Earth, but it's pretty parallel to Earth. We've had, roughly about 100+ billion people die throughout history. You know how much 100 billion is? So if we use that number as, a bit of a starting off point, let's just say 100 billion people have died also within the history of Gaia. When we see them at the end of the game in developing Midgar, that wouldn't take anywhere near 100 billion. If I'm being generous, I would say a billion. I think probably within the millions, somewhere within the millions, that's what it would take to cover up Midgar. But we'll be generous and give them a whole billion. There'd still be 99 billion Whisperers left somewhere. Based on the number we're using, of course, but even if you cut it in half, let's just say the history of Gaia, 50 billion people have died. Give them a whole billion to cover Midgar, there'd still be 49 billion somewhere. So I find it pretty strange that that small group that's messing with Aerith within this room had to leave because of a disturbance somewhere else. Now, if it's Sephiroth, I kind of understand it because Sephiroth is a big deal. But if it's for, Wedge, come on. You didn't have an extra group, a couple of Whisperers somewhere else that could throw Wedge out of the building? I also think this would destroy the theory of, the Whisperers, deciding fate and stuff all throughout time. Now, I don't know how you exactly explain the Zack scene, which we're going to talk about in a minute anyways. But, if they can't even have a group right here messing with Aerith and also somebody else taking care of whatever else is happening in the area, then how can they possibly be all throughout time? Also, if the planet just creates them, why not create such an astronomical amount of them that they can never be stopped or intervened with, unless what they're made of is a finite source, like souls, or the life stream, or whatever. That makes sense. It's okay, we can only have so many Whisperers, we can only create so many, or we're just going to destroy the planet. Also, if they are made of, souls, or the life stream, or whatever, that'd be an interesting parallel to Shinra, because, of course, Shinra is using Mako, and it's killing the planet, but if the planet is using the life stream to create Whisperers, it itself is also destroying itself. Now, how this wraps around to something I was talking about a year ago is I used to be a pretty big advocate for the theory of Zack still going to die. Based on the ending and just the way things are played out, I thought he was going to die. Obviously, I turned around on that theory. I think he's alive now. So one of my reasons for why I thought he's still going to die is that when we see him supposedly surviving the last stand, it's not for another minute or so until they actually blow up above Midgar and throw Zack to the side or whatever. So my thought was that they were here during this last stand the entire time, so he couldn't have possibly killed them all, because obviously the Whisperers would have intervened. But based on this translation, they go away when there's a small disturbance, and more than likely, they left the last stand segment to go deal with our group at the Singularity. Now, that's not necessarily an original idea or anything of mine. I've heard that before in the past, probably a year or so ago, that people have theorized that the Whisperers left that segment to go deal with the Singularity, and that's how Zack survived. But I think with this translation, it gives us that roundabout confirmation of that. Because obviously, if they're going to leave whenever there's Sephiroth in the Shinra building or Wedge in the Shinra building, they're obviously going to leave the last stand to go help with our group trying to destroy them entirely at the Singularity. I also think this would actually explain how Zack survived, because the Whispers weren't there. It's a pretty simple answer, but we kind of talk a lot about, did Sephiroth save him? Did the Whispers themselves intentionally save him or whatever? But I think he simply survived just because he's a badass and the Whispers weren't there to make sure that he died. He just killed everybody. And the fact that it seems like they can't be everywhere at once would explain why, when there's deviations from the original Final Fantasy VII story, they don't intervene sometimes, because maybe they're distracted with something else somewhere else. Because if the Whispers could be everywhere at once, so to speak, then nothing would ever deviate from the original Final Fantasy VII, because they would be present and ready to intervene. Anyways, dudes, that is pretty much the video. I thought this was kind of cool and gave us a lot to talk about, and kind of gave us a follow-up to some shit I was talking about last year or so. And gave us a bit of answers to some other shit too. Anyways, that's the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, guys. Only once I did more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on my notifications. Follow me on Twitter, dashingdavidYT. I'm on Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description. End of the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like low gain or leave it like Cobain.